Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Vietnam Innovators. I'm your host, Hao. Thank you for tuning in week in and week out for supporting the show. Without you, the show would not be possible. Today, we have a guest, and the very first guest from Hai Phong. Hai Phong's the largest port city in all of Vietnam, of course, based in the north of Vietnam. It ships anything and everything, mostly from the north of the country to around the world. And we have a guest here today that knows quite a lot about that. Not about the shipping business specifically, but more about the ports and industrial zones where the north has a prolific number of businesses operating in that space. So Bruno Jaspaert, the CEO of Deep Sea Industrial Zones, a Belgian company, but mostly Vietnamese. They've been here for a while, and they have a lot to share today about that space. So Bruno, thank you for being on the show.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting.
Yes.
I admit I live and work in Hai Phong, and I'm proud to do so.
Yeah.
And it's quite different place than Ho Chi Minh. But for us as a company, it's been a really nice place to get started in Vietnam. We arrived about 25 years ago, 26 actually, and counting.
Wow.
And in those days, there was probably almost nothing. So we started from scratch. We even had to build the first 4-star hotel because there was not even a hotel.
Wow.
And from there onwards, we developed our current cluster of industrial zones. So that represents about 3,400 hectares of industrial space, which makes us one of the biggest, if not the biggest one in the north of Vietnam. And we are also the only European-based developer in the whole of Vietnam.
Fantastic. Yeah, a lot of stories from there. Just having him share about the fact that he lives and works in Hai Phong, a lot of sparks and a lot of curiosity. And we'll hope to deep dive into that today in our podcast. Thank you, Bruno. We're going to start with some rapid fire questions before we get into the podcast. There's no right or wrong answer, so please just keep them short. These are for those 1 minute videos.
I'll try to keep them short.
Exactly. So first question for you, what brought you to Vietnam?
Work.
What excites you about Vietnam?
I think the limitless opportunities and the people.
What makes Vietnam an attractive location for industrial development?
I think today, I would say it's in the top 3 worldwide to develop industrial property.
If you had to explain to a stranger what you did at Deep Sea, how would you do it?
I solve problems for other people so that their investment can become success in Vietnam.
What makes Deep Sea different than other industrial park developers?
I would say we are by far the most sustainable, service-driven industrial developer you can find in Vietnam. And we are a developer with a twist. We are a bit quirky or a bit different or more European, but definitely we make a difference.
What's an innovation at Deep Sea that you're most proud of?
The thing I'm most proud of in Deep Sea is that we managed to set up an organic farm. As a trial, we have been delivering the past year and a half everybody in our company that earns less than 15 million VND, twice a month of organic food basket from our own farm. And we are rolling that now out as a business model to all our customers.
On a Sunday at 10 a.m., where would you be and what would you be doing?
On a Sunday, 10 a.m., either on my bike, because I come from a bike-crazy country, and exercising, or I would be on the chaotic flower market of Hai Phong, or I might be nipping in my favorite fur booth and having the best fur you can find in the whole of Vietnam, I believe.
Amazing. Okay. And last question before we get into the podcast. What's your favorite Vietnamese word or phrase that you've learned?
I can tell you the first one, which was Dap Chai.
Dap Chai, okay. Very good, Bruno. Thank you for sharing that. Lovely. I'm super curious about your business. To be honest, when Deep Sea came across my desk for this interview, I was curious mostly because people don't talk about this a lot. And in particular, the fact that you guys are based in Hai Phong, you've been here for 26 or so years, and also a European investor. Most people believe that these more foundational industries like industrial zones are mostly Vietnamese companies. They've been around for ages.
Correct.
They're in the bigger places like Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City, but you guys are really something different.
So we developed our own little niche pocket.
Yeah, yes. I love it. So why don't we just start with some introduction of what you do at Deep Sea, how you even ended up there, and maybe a little bit of history of the Deep Sea company as well.
So the first question, how I ended up there, somebody called me and said, it's time that you do something with your life. I was at that moment working in the States.
Okay.
I just sold my company that I started up in oil and gas in the UK to an American company. We took it to an IPO. I thought, okay, what's next? And then I got a phone call. And after that phone call, I was on a plane to Vietnam and decided it's worth the challenge. Today, most of my work is actually aligning the different shareholders we have in the various companies, because Deep Sea is a cluster of companies. We have now 12 legal entities in the meantime, but not all have the same shareholders. So there's quite a bit of strategic negotiation to be done. And secondly, I'm occupying myself mostly about how can we grow our company. Over the past 5 years, despite COVID, we managed to quintuple our company. So it's 5 times bigger than 5 years ago.
Wow.
Which is, I believe, one of the things I'm most proud of. But of course, we need to safeguard that for the future. So that means we cannot only rely on what we've built up in Guangning and Haiphong, but we will also have to do something else. And that is currently the stage we're at. So we have a department, our business development team, that is looking into that. And I'm working closely together with them to see what's next. But overall, I think, as any other job where you're in charge of a team, and you should know probably just as well as me, it's about people. Managing people, making sure that your people can make a difference for your customers.
And tell us about the history of how a mostly Belgian at the time company decided, hey, let's do something in Vietnam and Haiphong specifically. Do you know how the history of that unfolded?
I know, I was there, but I know.
For that?
I believe Deep Sea would have never arrived in Vietnam, to be honest, especially not in Haiphong, if not for a very interesting fact that 26 years ago, the founders and the capital providers of the company wanted actually to invest in China. And they took an option on a very good plot of land nearby the Bund in Shanghai. And they cut the deal and they flew to China. And at that moment, the Chinese partner backed out because he thought the deal was not good enough for him. And they raised the money and they didn't have anything to invest anymore. And as it happened, at that moment, there was an American company that was asked to invest in Haiphong as part of a bigger investment drive because they wanted to get an insurance license, AIG, American insurance company. And they said, okay, fine, we can invest in some industrial property, but we have no idea how to do this. And by sheer luck, that same week that the deal fell through in China, these people got the phone call from the American counterparts. And they said, you know what, we lost our time and money anyway, let's fly from China to Vietnam. They went to Haiphong, they looked at the port. At that moment, a dormant river port, hardly any development. And they've seen the same future that is today being realized, and they said, we will do it.
That's fantastic.
That's it.
Almost 30 years ago.
Correct. So it takes some vision and some guts, and definitely some convincing, I think, for getting the shareholders and the capital providers on board for that. But they managed, and it was very slow, especially the first 10 years, very, very slow, very tough, upstream, against the stream, basically. But in the end, they managed.
So, I mean, you mentioned just before this that the business has 5x'd in 5 years.
Yeah.
So we're talking the first 20 years, a lot of foundational building,
also getting
relationships,
it right,
getting everything together.
But also, you cannot just be successful because you're great. Anyone who tells you that, you should not believe. We've been lucky as well. We had Mr. Trump first coming down hard on China, which created a first motivation for some people to think about China plus one. And then, obviously, North Vietnam benefited from that. And secondly, you had then COVID, disrupting the logistics supply chain. So for the first time ever, people started to wonder, but is this actually what we should do? Put all our eggs in one basket? Should we really produce everything in China? Then you had the congestion for all the container ports around the globe due to that disruption. So a number of geopolitical events have helped us. And I believe the fact that we could couple that with my condition when I took this job, that I was willing to take this on, but coming from oil and gas, I decided that I wanted to make a difference in terms of sustainability, when sustainability was not even the fancy word it is today. And we managed. We managed to rewrite our story, to set up new projects, new accents, and that's where we are today.
I want to pinpoint on one area that you've mentioned a couple of times now, which is sustainability, about ESG. And for our listeners, you may notice and recognize the name Deep Sea Industrial Zones because they were a partner of ours at our recent ESG investor conference a few months back. And thank you for that support, by the way. And I remember that was the first time I heard about it. And the branding looked pretty slick. Made me curious, like, what is this? And it turns out it's industrial zones, not the sexiest business, but a very large part of the Vietnamese economy.
Mind you, we're very sexy.
Okay, so you do believe that. So I want you to break the mold here a little bit. Why place such a focus on ESG and sustainability? What kind of difference does it make for a business like yours?
I believe not only for our business. It makes sense for any business. But to explain that, I should perhaps go back when I started to explain my own people. Because it was also an uphill battle internally.
Okay.
Because why should we invest money in making things better if we still just can do what we do, just sell land and that's it? For me, there is only one future. I keep repeating to all our people and our customers. And that future, by default, will have to be sustainable. Because if it's not sustainable, that means that when you're in the future, that new future for those people will just become increasingly more difficult. So whatever we do, we should keep in mind that what we're doing, we should be able to replicate time and time again in the future. And if you take that as a baseline, then your view on what you can do or cannot do might alter your day-to-day reality. So for Deep Sea, that is not a fancy report. Mind you that we have now a ESG report, the first ever written by an industrial zone in Vietnam.
Okay.
And we will keep doing that, like our version of non-financial reporting towards the outer world. But for me, ESG is not a bunch of paper. ESG or sustainability both have the same problem. They're linguistical mistakes. They should have not been a noun, but a verb. It means that you need to do something. It means that you make a difference, that you take action to make things better. And I can give you many, many examples how we try to make that difference in Deep Sea. And I think that hits quite a few of the right notes, ticks the boxes for a number of investors. But of course, there's still many investors with shorter-term views that say, no, we don't care. We want just the cheapest price. We want the cheapest land, the cheapest people. My view on that is that in the near future, those companies will be the first to leave Vietnam again as well. So I prefer to populate our parks with people with a long-term vision and that can believe in the same values as we do. That means also, actually, that we sometimes refuse customers. If somebody comes in, is willing to pay the highest price, but has a very polluting industrial process, we might refuse. If, for example, it uses coal, we will say no. If it reduces the amount of available water and we cannot recycle it, I believe it's also not a business that is meant to be there for the future.
Let's take a step back a little bit. I think this all sounds great. I think sustainability is not just good for the future, but it's good for the bottom line.
Sure.
Let's be frank about that as well.
Perhaps I need to make it clearer. It's good for the bottom line in the long term, but in the short term, it does cost money.
Okay.
But many things cost money before they actually give you some profit back.
True. Were you guys always like this as a
Definitely
business?
not.
And what triggered that, would you
Me.
say? You, okay. And
it's the only thing I take personal credit for.
Yeah, what triggered it within you as the CEO? Was it an experience 10 years ago?
It's part of what I have tried to build on over my past careers.
Okay.
I've worked in chemicals, I worked in logistics, I worked in metallurgy, and then oil and gas. And I've always tried to make changes from within. I know that many people can stand on the barricades and say, oh, we'll be green and we will do this and we will do that. I believe the biggest changes are from within.
Oh, that's great.
So that's why I try to step into an industry and step by step make a difference. I also believe that you cannot make big changes. It's like a ship. And you can only steer it step by step. A ship cannot be reversed straight away. And that's what, step by step, our policy in terms of sustainability is achieving.
Okay.
And I also believe we can take a certain credit for it because nobody forces us to do so. It's by our own sheer conviction and decision.
Very good. I know for a fact that most of the people, not most, but many of the people listening to the podcast are in similar spaces. There are either private equity investors all the way to manufacturers to land investors. But for those that aren't familiar with this business, like me, I probably know more than the average person, but I'm very curious. Walk us through how Deep Sea does business. Like, what do you guys sell, and who are the customers buying what you sell?
Okay.
Just walk us through the basics a little bit, and that'll help break down the rest of the podcast.
So I'll try to imagine you're my customer.
Yes. Okay, there we go.
And you might have heard of Deep Sea, or you've seen our brand, or you heard somebody speaking and you think, wow, that sounds cool. Perhaps it's a good place for us. We're based in the south, but perhaps we want to expand in the north, or we're outside Vietnam and we need to find a new home for our newest expansion. First of all, you're never alone. Secondly, we have to beat Vietnamese competitors day in, day out. And unfortunately, we will always lose on price. I do not even want to compete on price.
Yeah.
That means that we need to offer you things that can make your life better, or that ticks a few boxes for what you need to comply with. So that means that when you're looking for land, actually you're looking for the same thing as anyone else. So I have to tell you that all customers are more or less the same in generalistic terms. They want a plot of land of a certain shape, as soon as possible available.
Okay.
They want energy, they want water or other utility services, and they want people. If you can cover that, you can sell.
And what kind of customers do you service right now? Like electronics makers, furniture?
Lately, we've had quite a bit of success in the electronics manufacturing. Partially, I believe, because they have to report to their customers in quite stringent terms in terms of sustainability.
Right.
At the same time, also because we're close to a port and it's very easy and cheap in terms of logistics for them to ship everything out at that moment. It's not for nothing that LG singled out Haiphong 7 years ago as their new offshore headquarters for their biggest investments they've ever done.
Yep.
So we have a lot of automotive, but we have, at this moment, especially a lot of manufacturing, which is a bit strange because we're actually very close to the port, and you would think that logistics would be the biggest amount of investors. That wave has not really yet arrived. I believe with the further development of the new container terminals in Haiphong, that might arrive very soon.
Okay.
But to come back, we have those four things that everybody wants, but we have ports. Not everybody can offer port services. Okay. We can.
So you guys own?
Yes, we have a chemical jetty in Haiphong, and we are developing a bulk cargo port in the new port of Lac Quyen, also Haiphong. And we have another 9 ports lined up in Quang Ninh, where we develop a complete new port cluster that will be connected to Lac Quyen.
Amazing. A bit more full house kind of suite of services there. Everything you're saying sounds great, and you've had some caveats. You've mentioned like you can't compete on price. In fact, you'll probably be one of the more pricier options compared to the very affordable options. Let's talk about the challenges of that. You're probably one of the market leaders, if not the market leader, in setting that standard for ESG and sustainability. I'm sure there's some challenges that come as a result. Your sales teams probably, they like to pull the lever discounts and exactly right. They like to pull those levers to close the account, but they can't simply because the margins aren't.
No, they're not allowed,
and they're not allowed to. See, even then.
Because I have a very good one on this. So. Obviously, everybody drives a car. In Vietnam, I notice it's also quite important for some people to drive a really nice car.
Yeah.
How many of them drive a Vietnamese car?
I mean, none of them, probably.
Well, in Haiphong a few because we have VinFast, but even then. So why would you drive a Porsche or an Audi if you can buy a VinFast? So that's the same reason why you might want to select, similarly like your car, perhaps a better industrial zone. If it's only about money, how much you pay for the land, fine, go for the cheapest one, but then you have to also accept the consequences. I believe that there is a very big schism or paradigm where in Vietnam a lot is short term. You have so many opportunities in this country where you as a customer, you can invest $1 million today in this and you get a return within a year. Setting up factories is actually something that takes a long time. And I believe it's one of the reasons why the supply chain is still not populated enough by Vietnamese companies. I believe more Vietnamese companies could pop up and become good partners for the FDI investors. But still, it's not happening so fast. And I think it's partially because there are so many other opportunities that are easier. And we are definitely telling a different story. We don't go for the easy way. Because like you say, our salespeople obviously would be happy to give discounts.
Yeah.
But I think they should sell on our merit.
Let's talk about easier opportunities. What does that mean exactly? Is it mean in the industrial zone industry? Does that mean like there are fewer regulations, fewer requirements, fewer capex requirements? What does easier mean in industrial?
But so many
zones?
things are easy. An industrial zone should provide all the necessary services. But for example, about 95% of all industrial zones will outsource all electricity to EVN.
Okay.
Under the current constraints for energy supply,
Right.
of course,
It's not
that
a good
creates
idea.
quite a few issues. We have gone for the hard way. We invest ourselves in our own grid. So the whole of Deep Sea has only one customer for the EVN. It's us. And we have our own electricity distribution company that is actually delivering directly to our customers. And we have our own electricity generation through renewables.
I'm so curious that I want to get on a plane and go to Haiphong and see
Sure.
all this.
It's
So
the city of
I
your
will- I will
dreams,
be
but
going
you
in a
don't
couple
realize
months.
it yet.
I will be going in a couple months. I will have to take up your offer, Bruno. But just so the audience can help understand and illustrate the scale of an industrial zone operation, especially yours, where it's a bit more fully integrated. How many hectares are we talking about? How many employees are we talking about?
We're talking about 3,400 hectares.
Okay. Are you the Deep Sea must be the largest land investor in Haiphong?
I believe
at
that
point?
represents almost 20% of the industrial land in the north at this moment.
Okay. And the
Fully
entire
approved.
north? Or?
Yeah, fully approved.
Okay.
So there's many more zones
Yeah.
on the way to get a concession approved, but
Okay.
that are on the market today. That's
In
roughly
all of North Vietnam?
Yes,
20%. Deep Sea. Okay.
yes, for a small company from
Yeah.
a small country.
That's a small company? Well, from a
Well,
small
we
country?
are. I still consider us a small company.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And we have 400 people today. When I arrived, that is actually tomorrow, exactly 5 years ago. I was number 113.
Okay.
So, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Incredible growth then for the last few years. Again, I want to go visualize all this. So,
But it's big. That means for us, if you drive from one end to the other end, you will
Yeah.
be driving without traffic jams for at least an hour.
let's talk about, you mentioned the logistics industry. Some Vietnamese companies are not investing too much into it or not reliant
I
on
believe logistics they do.
Yeah.
They still attempt.
Okay.
But I believe the bigger problem that I see, having worked in multiple industries, I believe not enough Vietnamese entrepreneurs go for the higher added value. Of course, it takes more knowledge, it takes more time,
Yeah.
also more money, and there are easier concepts to be found. Driving a truck is easy, right? Building a shoddy warehouse and just store things inside, but repackaging it, sending it out, labeling it up for different countries, all what is called third-party services from a logistics viewpoint, I think any player today in Vietnam is foreign. Japanese will have some Japanese providers, some Korean providers. Here in the south, you have some European logistic players. But there's a lot of money to be made, but it asks a higher degree of quality, a higher standard that you need to live up to.
Okay.
Same for all kinds of industrial supply. There's plenty of our investors in our zones asking for more local sourced components, metal component, plastic components.
So Vietnamese entrepreneurs could stand to benefit greatly.
I believe they're great
if they
entrepreneurs.
can service those capabilities. Yeah.
I think you can still make a lot of money by doing less difficult things. At least that's my personal opinion. I believe it's getting better. But I also really think that we have some Vietnamese companies that started out as supplying just on a small scale some foreign companies and now are growing tremendously fast. So I think it's possible.
Okay. Looking ahead for Deep Sea, I think you've laid a pretty good understanding of where you guys are, what you've been doing, largely speaking, for the past 5 years. What's the next 5 years look like for Deep Sea? You're expanding to different provinces even, and I'm sure your ambitions don't stop there. Would love for you to share more about what you hope to do in the next 5.
Yeah, well, ambitions should never stop, I guess,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
But what to do next? I believe If I would have gone back in time 5 years ago, you would have asked me, where would you be? I would be quite happy with what we have achieved today after 5 years, without any prior knowledge. Having lived it for 5 years, I think we could have done still a lot better. There was COVID, which nobody could foresee, but definitely stopped our growth in the middle of where actually, okay, you can't get anybody in, so you can't sell anything to anyone. We want to expand under the right conditions in the right places. That means we might have to go boldly where no one has ever gone, just like we've done in Haiphong. There's a number of provinces we're looking into. There's also the possibility to team up with a local player, bring in our know-how, our brand, and then use their land bank and develop that one. Some people make a pass at us and say, can we work together? So there are some talks, nothing's been signed up, but it's definitely on the map of the future. So in 5 years from now, I would still like to have the same available land bank as we have today. So out of our 3,400 hectares, we have now roughly 1,850 left. If we sell about 200 a year, that means that we need to create a new land bank of at least 1,000 hectares in the next 5 years if we don't want to diminish what we have in store now. So that would be one part of our expansion. The second part would be I would like to integrate even more services than we do today. So we're now looking at a first project where we will deliver steam and as a byproduct generate from that green steam project green energy. I hope also to roll out our deep sea farm model. I would really like that to take off anywhere in Vietnam because I think it had the ambition and the possibility to become something very unique. And in 5 years from now, the thing would make me most proud is we can say at that moment that we have proven over the past 10 years that you can develop economic growth that is sustainable.
That's an incredible mission. Well done.
Yes, I might not sleep for 5 years.
Yeah, let's see. I'm even imagining you guys can open a port that doesn't even exist by the end of your tenure. Let's see.
Well, you never know.
You never know.
I had last year there was a visit of the Prime Minister of Vietnam to the Prime Minister of Belgium.
Okay.
And I was honored to be asked to give a speech. And I explained to him that the first lesson I had to learn and accept in Vietnam is that everything is a problem. But the second lesson was much more important. For all the problems in Vietnam, there are also solutions. And I think if you can make that mental click, I believe combining some Western insight with Vietnamese drive, loyalty, and entrepreneurship, you can get quite far.
Well, best of luck to Deep Sea and looking forward to how the next 5 years play out. And I will be visiting Haiphong. And if you guys are curious about what Bruno and his team does at Deep Sea, check out their website. We'll include some information in the bottom below, or pay them a visit in Haiphong. I have two last questions, Bruno, less about Deep Sea, but more about the people and the team and a little bit about yourself as well. Haiphong, huge population, but at the same time, a lot of well-educated Haiphong locals move elsewhere. They move to Hanoi, they move to Ho Chi Minh City. In fact, at Vietcetera, probably 10% of our company is from Haiphong, actually. I don't know the exact number, but...
They should join us.
I know that. I was about to say, what is it like hiring for a company like Deep Sea, which is quite, cutting edge and trying to, move ahead in the game and not just be another industrial zone operator, but introducing ideals like sustainability and whatever it might be. How's the hiring like at Deep Sea for being based in Haiphong?
The hiring is same as anywhere else. It's a battle for talent.
Okay.
But we also need to be clear that we are a bit privileged because I truly believe that if you walk through the doors of Deep Sea, our office or our park, you do not feel necessarily to be in Vietnam. All our communication is in English. We have a European management style, quite open, quite diverse, I think. 65% of our company is female, 85% in the office, actually. Many people from Haiphong studied abroad or studied in one of the big cities in Vietnam and then don't go back. But Haiphong people are very loyal, I believe, to their city. Many of them still like Haiphong. It's not a city that it can be easily compared to Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh today. There's also, it looks also very different. It almost gives you the feel of a village for me. But imagine now that you studied abroad and you're really smart, but you want to go back to Haiphong and live with your family. What is the nicest place that you could think of working in that combines Haiphong with part of what you picked up abroad? And then I think we make a good chance to convince you to actually join us and work in deep sea.
There you go.
I believe deep sea as a company is also quite outgoing. We have the biggest city festival that we have set up ourselves. It's called Beer Fest. All of you are invited. It's the first weekend of October. It's a Belgian beer and food festival for 3 days.
I'm not even lying. I was actually thinking about that weekend.
You should do
October 6th to 8th?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So we did it just before COVID the first time. People told me it's impossible. There was never a outdoor music festival for as long as people could remember. And we had almost 3,000 people every night. We did it last year for the first time again after COVID. And this year it ties in with 50 years relation between Belgium and Vietnam.
Right.
So it should be even, luckily, I hope so, fingers crossed, better and bigger than ever before. So by all means, I will be happily treating you to a few Belgian beers.
Very good. No, I definitely, that was on my agenda, and I will have to follow up with you about that, Bruno. Last question, which I always like to ask all of my guests on this show. You're an expert about a lot of things, but primarily industrial zones, at least in the last 5 years.
Correct.
And you as an executive, of course, would love to know a lot more to empower your leadership, your knowledge about operating a business, being here in Vietnam, whatever it might be. So my question for you is, and it's for the purpose of this show as well, what would you like to know more about that you don't know enough about, either personally, professionally? For example, and I use this example all the time, a lot of our guests say they want to know more about sustainability. A lot of them say they want to know more about the airline industry, and they just don't come from those, and they want people to deliver those insights. And thank you. You've answered a few people's requests. So I think that's very helpful. Thank you, Bruno. But for you, what would you like to know more about that can help your personal career or just even your personal interest?
First of all, I need to say that in my career, I have made some strange choices because most people go into one sector and they stay. Because if you stay long enough, you become worth more money, and then that makes you also
An expert.
Expert. And I sometimes have decided to jump from one sector to another, even accepting that I would actually earn less. Actually, for this very job, I earn less than my last job. But that's fine, because I believe that way you can get to know more things and get better at it. Running industrial zones, as a matter of fact, is quite complex. There's many different industries coming to you. You need to know about the law, you need to know sales, but there's also the fact that you need to deal with the government. And having done so many different sectors before, well, so many different, 3, but okay, helps because it gives you a more general view on what matters. And you also better understand the investors. So I strongly believe that whatever you would like to know, that's simple, study. So my favorite pastime would be studying. I must be old-fashioned, I still read books, but you also have the internet. So at this moment, I am studying how to set up a biological fish farm.
Okay.
That's
on behalf of Deep Sea, or
perhaps, or for my own.
Okay.
But it's something that I really believe in, that most of the future fish will be farmed, and you have a lot of organic farms, but you have so far no organic fish farming. So I'm studying that, and I reach out to people and ask their opinion. So I believe the biggest virtue of today's age is whatever you study. You can, of course, we can do fancy MBAs, you can do another master, but in reality, if you want to know something, you can do it.
Okay.
Having said that, your question was, what do you really want to know? I have to admit, tôi không biết tiếng Việt. I would really like to speak proper Vietnamese.
Sure.
But it's really, really tough.
I'm sure it is, especially, well, in Haiphong it must be easier. I'm not sure if there are many teachers of Vietnamese for foreigners in Haiphong.
Plenty teachers, but I think it's really tough.
Yeah.
And I like languages. I speak 7. But I have to admit that Vietnamese is challenging my capabilities.
Right.
Or I should devote more time to it, perhaps.
Okay. Well, there you go, everyone. So if you can answer one of Bruno's 2 most must-learn things, one is about organic fish farming, how that process works. I have a couple of introductions to make for you myself, actually. I know an oyster farm in Ha Long Bay. the owner of Oyster Farm. I actually toured it 3 years ago. I'm going back again that same
that
weekend.
would be
so
great, yeah.
maybe I'll take you. Let's see if we have time.
Yeah, well, we can swap it for a few Belgian beers.
Sure, there we go. And the second one is I know a farmer who makes caviar with sturgeon.
Yeah.
I believe it's in De Laat, but I have to check again. But he
will
has his
be
own farm.
somewhere more up,
Right.
higher up
Yeah,
because of the temperature.
mountains.
Yes.
Right, yeah. So he's another candidate. But about learning Vietnamese, I can't help you at all. But I'm sure there's many others out there. Bruno Jaspaert, the CEO of Deep Sea Industrial Zones. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. I don't know anything about this space, and I've learned a little bit today, and I'm even more curious after this. I can't wait to check out Deep Sea in Haiphong and then learn more about what you guys do. If you guys are interested in learning more about what Bruno does and his team, just check out the info below. We have a lot of reading to share for you guys. Bruno, thank you for dropping by the studio.
The pleasure was entirely mine. It was great to have a little chat.
Yep.
And I believe if anyone is interested either to join us or to get to know more about how it's possible that we actually make a profit being a sustainable company, they're more than welcome.
Okay, very good. Thanks, everyone, and see you next week. Bye-bye. Thank you to the Century Vietnam for accompanying Vietnam Innovators. The Century is Vietnam's leading social real estate developer and community creator. With a focus on innovation and creativity, the Century are pioneers in Vietnam's co-working and flexible office sector. From grade A co-working spaces that ignite creativity, curated lifestyle events driving community to co-living developments that foster connections, the Century is redefining the real estate landscape ecosystem. The Century, your business launchpad partner in Vietnam.